The contractions hit like waves crashing against jagged rocks. Relentless, merciless, stealing my breath before I could fully recover from the last one. I gripped the edge of the hospital bed, my knuckles white against the sterile sheets, and tried to remember the breathing exercises from those prenatal classes I'd attended alone. In, out, count to 4. But the pain didn't care about counting. "Ms. Torres, we need you to fill out these admission forms." The nurse's voice was kind but distant, like she was speaking through water. She handed me a clipboard, and I stared at the papers through blurred vision, my hand trembling as I tried to focus on the words swimming before me. Emergency contact name. My pen hovered over the line. The delivery room felt impossibly cold despite the sweat beading on my forehead, trickling down my temples. I should write my sister's name, Sophia, who lived 3 states away and hadn't returned my calls in 2 months. Or maybe my mother, though we hadn't spoken since I'd told her about the pregnancy, since she'd called me foolish for trusting a man who disappeared the moment he'd gotten what he wanted. Another contraction seized me, and I gasped, the pen clattering to the floor. "Take your time, honey," the nurse murmured, picking up the pen and placing it back in my hand. Her scrub smelled like lavender and antiseptic, a combination that made my stomach turn. I didn't have time. The baby was coming whether I was ready or not, whether I had someone to call or not. 7 months ago, I'd been a different person, a waitress at an upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of the city, invisible to everyone except when they needed their water refilled or their tables cleared. I'd moved through that world like a ghost, collecting tips and avoiding eye contact, saving every dollar for a nursing degree I wasn't sure I'd ever afford. Then he'd walked in. I hadn't seen his face at first, just the sharp cut of his charcoal suit. The way the fabric moved like liquid shadow as he'd crossed the dining room. The entire restaurant had shifted when he'd entered. A subtle change in atmospheric pressure that made the other servers straighten their spines, and the manager appear from the back office with an obsequious smile. Even the kitchen had gone quiet for a moment, the usual clatter of pans and shouted orders dying to a reverent hush. He'd been surrounded by men in dark suits, their eyes constantly scanning the room, their bodies positioned in a way that suggested protection rather than companionship. But it was his presence that had made my hands shake as I'd approached their table. Something in the way he'd carried himself, the casual authority in every gesture, the sense that he could destroy or create with equal ease. "Water," he'd said without looking up from his phone. And I'd nearly dropped the pitcher. That should have been it. A simple transaction. Pour the water, take the order, stay invisible. But I'd fumbled. My hand had knocked against his glass, sending it toppling across the pristine white tablecloth, ice water flooding toward his lap. I'd frozen, horrified, watching the catastrophe unfold in slow motion, already calculating how many shifts it would take to pay for the ruined suit. Then he'd looked at me. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, dark amber with flecks of gold that caught the candlelight. There was something dangerous in that gaze, something that made every instinct scream at me to run. But there was also curiosity, a sudden focus that felt like being caught in a spotlight. "I'm so sorry, I'd stammered, grabbing napkins, trying to blot the water before it could do more damage. My manager had appeared like a conjured demon, already apologizing profusely, already promising to comp the entire meal, fire the clumsy waitress, sacrifice whatever necessary to appease this man. "Leave us." His voice had been quiet, barely above a murmur, but it carried absolute command. My manager had gone pale and retreated. The other men at the table had shifted, hands moving to their jackets in a gesture that made my blood run cold. I'd stood there, frozen, clutching soggy napkins, waiting for whatever came next. "What's your name?" he'd asked, and somehow that had been more terrifying than anger would have been. "Elena," I'd whispered. "Elena Torres." He'd studied me for a long moment, and I'd felt stripped bare under that gaze, like he could see every secret, every fear, every desperate hope I'd ever harbored. Then he'd smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Elena Torres," he'd repeated, tasting my name like wine. "You can go." I'd fled, but that should have been the end of it. Should have been. Another contraction ripped through me, dragging me back to the present, to the hospital bed and the clipboard still balanced on my knees. I pressed the pen to paper, my handwriting shaky and uneven. Emergency contact, Dante Moretti. I didn't know why I wrote his name. Maybe because he was the only person who'd made me feel seen in years. Even if that attention had been a curse. Maybe because some irrational part of me remembered the way he'd looked at me across that restaurant table. The way he'd shown up at my apartment the next night with a dozen black roses and an invitation I should have refused. Maybe because I was alone and terrified, and he was the only name that came to mind. The nurse took the clipboard, scanning the information with professional efficiency. Her eyebrows rose slightly when she read the name, and something flickered across her face. Recognition. Fear? But she said nothing, just clipped the forms to my chart and helped me into a hospital gown that felt like tissue paper against my skin. "The doctor will be in soon," she said. And then I was alone again, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaning products. I'd never told Dante about the pregnancy. How could I? After that first night, after he'd taken me to a penthouse that overlooked the entire city, after he'd touched me like I was something precious and breakable, after he'd whispered things in Italian against my skin that had sounded like prayers or curses, after all that, I'd woken up to find him gone. Not just gone from the bed, but gone from the city, according to the restaurant gossip. Business in Sicily, someone had said. Family matters. I'd waited 2 weeks before taking the pregnancy test. Another 3 before accepting the reality, and by then, tracking down a man like Dante Moretti seemed impossible and foolish in equal measure. Men like him didn't want complications. They didn't want waitresses calling with news that would tie them down, anchor them to mistakes made in moments of passion. So I'd kept silent. I'd worked double shifts until my feet swelled and my back screamed in protest. I'd moved to a cheaper apartment, a studio in a neighborhood where sirens were lullabies and the smell of garbage in summer was thick enough to taste. I'd saved every penny, bought secondhand baby clothes, assembled a crib that came in a box with instructions in 3 languages. I'd prepared to do this alone. The contraction that hit next made me cry out, a sound I barely recognized as my own. The nurse rushed back in, checking monitors, murmuring reassurances that felt hollow. The pain was evolving, changing from waves to something constant and consuming, a fire that started in my spine and radiated through every nerve. "You're progressing quickly," the nurse said, and I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Progressing toward what? Single motherhood? Poverty? A life of struggling to balance childcare and work, and the crushing weight of doing everything alone? The door to my room burst open. At first I thought I was hallucinating from the pain, that my oxygen-deprived brain had conjured him from desperation and memory, because it couldn't be real. Dante Moretti striding into my delivery room like he owned it, his presence filling the space until the walls seemed to shrink. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, his dark hair slightly disheveled, his amber eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my heart stutter. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits took positions outside the door. "Everyone out," he said, his voice that same quiet command I remembered from the restaurant. "Sir, this is a restricted—" the nurse began. "Out," she fled. We stared at each other across the sterile room, and I saw a muscle tick in his jaw. His hands were clenched at his sides, and there was something wild in his eyes, something barely controlled. "Elena," he said, my name rough in his throat. "Why the hell didn't you tell me?" I couldn't answer. Another contraction stole my voice, bending me forward as pain carved through my body like a blade. I heard him move, sharp, decisive steps that brought him to my bedside. And then his hand was there, gripping mine with a strength that should have hurt, but instead anchored me to something solid. "Breathe," he commanded, his other hand pressing against my lower back with surprising gentleness. "Look at me, Elena. Breathe." I forced my eyes open, met his gaze, and found myself breathing in sync with him without conscious thought. The contraction peaked and began to ebb, leaving me trembling and drenched in sweat. "How did you—" I started, my voice hoarse. "You listed me as your emergency contact." His accent was thicker than I remembered, Italian vowels bleeding through his careful English. "The hospital called. I was in a meeting across town. He said it like the meeting had been inconsequential, like he hadn't just abandoned whatever business dealings a man like him conducted to rush to a hospital, because a woman he'd spent one night with had written his name on a form. "I didn't think they'd actually call you," I whispered. "I didn't think you'd come." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You carry my child and you didn't think I'd come?" His grip on my hand tightened fractionally. 7 months, Elena. 7 months you kept this from me." "You left," I shot back, finding strength in anger even as another wave of pain began building. "You disappeared. What was I supposed to do? Hire a private investigator to track you down? Send a message through your restaurant reservation?" His jaw clenched. "I left you my number. A burner phone that went straight to voicemail and never returned calls. I'd tried. God, I'd tried for 2 weeks, leaving increasingly desperate messages until I'd finally accepted the truth. That I'd been a momentary distraction for a man who lived in a world I couldn't begin to understand. Because I was in Sicily dealing with... He stopped himself, the words cutting off sharply. His eyes swept over me, taking in the hospital gown, the monitors, the IV line threading into my arm. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more controlled. "We will discuss this later. Right now, you need to focus on bringing our child safely into this world. Our child." The words sent something warm and terrifying through my chest. The doctor entered then, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a neat bun. She paused when she saw Dante, her professional smile faltering slightly, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "Mr. Moretti," she said, and I realized she knew who he was. Of course she did. Men like Dante cast long shadows. "I'm Dr. Chen. I'll be delivering the baby." "What's her status?" he asked, still holding my hand, his thumb now tracing small circles against my palm in a gesture that might have been unconscious. Dr. Chen checked my chart, then performed an examination that made me want to crawl out of my skin despite having lost any semblance of modesty hours ago. "She's at 7 centimeters, she said. "Progressing well. Another few hours, probably. Hours." The word settled over me like a weight. "I want the best anesthesiologist in this hospital," Dante said. It wasn't a request. "I'm fine," I protested weakly, though the next contraction made a liar of me. "She's suffering," he continued as if I hadn't spoken, his eyes never leaving the doctor. "Whatever she needs, an epidural, anything, make it happen now." Dr. Chen glanced at me, and I saw the question in her eyes. This was my decision, my body, my choice. But I was so tired, and the pain was a living thing trying to tear me apart from the inside. And maybe it was okay to accept help. Even from him. "Yes," I breathed. "Please." The anesthesiologist arrived within minutes, moving with an efficiency that suggested Dante's reputation preceded him even here. The epidural was a strange relief, a pressure against my spine, then a gradual numbing that felt like sinking into warm water. The pain didn't disappear entirely, but it became manageable, distant. Something I could observe rather than drown in. Dante never let go of my hand. "Why didn't you try harder to find me?" he asked once we were alone again, the medical staff having retreated to give us privacy. His voice was low, almost gentle, but I heard the accusation beneath it. "Why should I have?" I countered, exhaustion making me reckless. "You're a..." I stopped, suddenly uncertain how to finish that sentence. "A criminal? A monster?" The whispers at the restaurant had painted him as both. Stories of the Moretti family passed between servers like forbidden currency. "You're not the kind of man who wants a pregnant waitress complicating his life. You know nothing about what I want." His free hand came up, fingers threading through my damp hair, pushing it back from my face. The gesture was possessive, tender, confusing. "If I had known, Cristo, Elena, if I had known you were pregnant, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you." "Why?" The question came out broken. "I'm nobody. I served you water and spilled it on your suit. That's all. No." The word was sharp, final. "You are the woman who looked at me like I was a man instead of a title, the woman who blushed when I complimented her eyes, the woman who trembled in my arms and said my name like a prayer." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. The woman carrying my heir. The word was archaic, wrong, but something in the way he said it made my breath catch. I don't understand any of this, I whispered. You barely know me. Then we will remedy that. He leaned closer, and I could smell his cologne, cedar and bergamot, and something darker, richer. But first, you will give me a healthy child. Then we will talk about the future.
There is no we, I tried to say, but another contraction cut through the epidural's numbness, stronger than before. Dr. Chen reappeared, checking monitors with renewed urgency. It's time, she announced. Elena, when the next contraction comes, I need you to push. Everything became a blur of sensation and command. Push. Breathe. Push again. Dante's voice in my ear, steady and low, counting with me, anchoring me, his hand gripping mine hard enough to bruise, and somehow that pain was grounding, real, something to focus on when everything else felt like chaos. I can see the head, Dr. Chen said. One more big push, Elena. I gathered every remaining scrap of strength and bore down, feeling my body stretch and tear, feeling something give way. Then, a sudden release, a wet slide, and the room filled with the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. A baby's cry. It's a boy, Doctor, Chen said, lifting a tiny, squirming creature covered in vernix and blood. A healthy baby boy. They placed him on my chest, this impossibly small human with dark hair plastered to his skull, and eyes that couldn't quite focus, but seemed to look at me anyway. My son. My baby. I touched his cheek with trembling fingers, and he turned toward the touch, rooting instinctively. He's perfect, I breathed. I glanced at Dante and felt my heart stop. He stood frozen beside the bed, staring at our son with an expression I'd never seen on any human face before. It was raw, unguarded, wonder and fear and something fierce and protective all tangled together. His hand shook as he reached out, then pulled back, as if afraid he might break this fragile new life. You can touch him, I said softly. He did, one finger trailing down the baby's tiny arm, and I watched this dangerous man, this alleged criminal, this figure who made entire restaurants fall silent, completely unmade by a newborn who weighed barely 7 pounds. My son, he whispered in Italian, then looked at me with eyes that blazed with possession and something deeper, more dangerous. Mine. The way he said it sent ice and fire through my veins in equal measure. Because I heard the promise in that word, the claim, the absolute certainty that he would never let us go. What have you named him? He asked. I haven't decided yet. I'd been waiting somehow, though I hadn't known what for. Alessandro, Dante said immediately. After my grandfather, Alessandro Moretti. I should have argued. Should have insisted on choosing my own child's name, on maintaining some scrap of autonomy. But I was so tired, and the name fit somehow, looking at this tiny dark-haired baby who had his father's strong nose and determined chin. Alessandro, I repeated, testing it. Sandro for short. Dante's smile was brilliant and terrifying. He leaned down and pressed his lips to my forehead, a gesture that felt like sealing a contract I hadn't agreed to. Rest now, cara mia, he murmured. I will take care of everything. Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they felt like the closing of a cage door. Soft, gentle, but final nonetheless. I woke to the sound of low voices speaking rapid Italian. The hospital room was dim, late afternoon sun filtering through half-closed blinds, casting everything in amber light. My body ached in places I hadn't known could ache. A deep soreness that reminded me of what I'd just endured, but the epidural had worn off completely, leaving me clear-headed for the first time in hours. Dante stood near the window, his back to me, phone pressed to his ear. Even in silhouette, he radiated coiled tension. One of his men, the one with the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stood guard at the door, his presence a reminder that this wasn't a normal hospital room, that the father of my child wasn't a normal man. Non mi importa, Dante said sharply into the phone. I don't care. Cancel everything for the next 2 weeks. Marco can handle the shipments. Tell Gianni if he has concerns he can bring them to me personally. A pause. No, I'm not explaining myself to the council.
They work for me, not the other way around. He ended the call with enough force that I heard the phone creak in protest. "You're awake," he said without turning, and I realized he must have sensed the change in my breathing. "Where's the baby?" Panic spiked through me. "Where's Sandro?" "In the nursery, being examined by the pediatrician I had flown in from Johns Hopkins." He turned, and I saw the exhaustion etched around his eyes despite his impeccable appearance. "He's perfect, Elena. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs that he's been demonstrating enthusiastically." The tension bled from my shoulders. "I should be with him. You should be resting." He moved to my bedside, and I noticed a leather bag on the chair I hadn't seen before. "But knowing you won't, I had some things brought for you. Clean clothes, toiletries. Your apartment is terrible," I supplied bitterly. "A studio in a neighborhood where gunshots are background noise?" His jaw tightened. "That ends today. I've already arranged for your belongings to be moved." I stared at him. "Excuse me? You and Alessandro will be living somewhere secure, somewhere appropriate for the Moretti heir." The casual arrogance of it made my temper flare, burning through the exhaustion. "You don't get to just decide that. That's my apartment. My life. Your apartment has a broken lock on the front door and mold in the bathroom." His voice remained calm, but I heard steel beneath it. "The building has no security system. The neighborhood had 3 shootings last month alone. You think I will allow my son to be raised there?" "Allow?" I pushed myself up in bed, ignoring the protest of sore muscles. "You don't get to allow or disallow anything. I'm his mother. I make the decisions about where we live." He leaned down, bracing his hands on either side of me, caging me against the pillows. His face was inches from mine, and I could see gold flecks dancing in his amber eyes like sparks. "You are the mother of my child," he said softly, dangerously, "which makes you mine to protect. Mine to provide for. Mine to keep safe from a world that would hurt you to get to me. Do you understand, Elena? The moment you wrote my name on that hospital form, you put a target on your back, on our son's back. There are men who would kill you both just to wound me." The words hit like physical blows. I hadn't thought. God, I'd been so focused on labor, on survival, that I hadn't considered the implications of tying myself to a man like him. "Then maybe," my voice cracked, "maybe you should just walk away, pretend you never got that call. We can disappear, change our names." "No." The word was absolute, final as a death sentence. His hand came up, cupping my face with unexpected gentleness. "You don't understand yet, Kara. I have searched for you for 7 months." I froze. "What? Did you think I could forget you? One night in my bed and you crawled under my skin like poison." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "I came back from Sicily to find you gone. No forwarding address at the restaurant. Your apartment empty. You vanished like smoke and it drove me half mad. I moved because I couldn't afford rent." I whispered, my mind reeling. I wasn't trying to hide from you. I know that now." His smile was bitter. "But then, I thought perhaps you'd seen too much, understood too much about what I am. I thought you'd run scared, so I searched. Private investigators, contacts in every borough, every hospital, every clinic, looking for Elena Torres, who seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. Why?" The question was barely audible. "Why go to such lengths?" "Because you're mine." He said it like it was obvious, inevitable. "From the moment I first tasted you, first heard you cry my name. Mine, Elena, and I protect what's mine." Before I could respond, a nurse knocked and entered, pushing a clear bassinet. My heart leapt at the sight of Sandro, swaddled in blue, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. "Someone wants his mama," the nurse said cheerfully, clearly oblivious to the tension crackling in the room. She showed me how to hold him properly, how to position him for feeding. The first attempt at breastfeeding was awkward and painful, but eventually Sandro latched on, and I felt a rush of hormones that made my eyes burn with unexpected tears. Dante watched with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, it felt protective, reverent almost. "I've arranged for a private suite," he said once the nurse had left. 2 bedrooms, private bath, stationed guards. You'll transfer there within the hour. Dante. And I've hired a night nurse, someone vetted by my security team. She'll help with feeding so you can sleep. I can't afford. You're not paying for anything. He sat in the chair beside my bed, close enough to touch. Ever again. Your days of working double shifts and living in squalor are over. Part of me wanted to argue, to cling to independence and pride. But I looked down at Sandro's tiny face, his impossibly small fingers flexing against my breast, and felt the weight of reality settle over me. How could I go back to that studio apartment? How could I work 60-hour weeks with a newborn? How could I give this child even a fraction of what his father could provide? What do you want from me? I asked quietly. Dante reached out, his fingers stroking Sandro's downy head with heartbreaking gentleness. I want you both safe. I want my son to grow up knowing his father. I want... He paused, and something vulnerable flickered across his face before the mask slammed back into place. I want a family, Elena, something I never thought I'd have. I don't know how to be part of your world, I admitted. I don't know the rules, the dangers. I was just a waitress. You are Alessandro's mother. That makes you the most important person in my world. His hand moved from Sandro to cup my cheek. And I will teach you everything you need to know. How to navigate my world, how to protect yourself, how to be the Donna of the Moretti family. Donna. Wife. The implication hung between us, terrifying and tempting. You're talking about marriage, I said, my voice shaking. Eventually. His smile was predatory. First, you will move into my home. Let me take care of you, provide for you both. Let Alessandro grow strong under my protection. Then, when you're ready, we will make it official. And if I'm never ready, his expression hardened, then you will still live under my roof, under my protection, raising my son. But I would prefer you came to me willingly, Elena. I would prefer you wanted this as much as I do. Sandro finished feeding and let out a small, satisfied sigh. I shifted him to my shoulder for burping, and Dante immediately stood, taking a cloth from the bedside table and placing it over my shoulder with surprising competence. You've done this before, I observed. I have younger cousins, many younger cousins. A ghost of a real smile crossed his face. The Moretti family is extensive. Will they accept me? The question escaped before I could stop it. A nobody who got pregnant after one night? They will accept you because I command it. His tone left no room for argument. And because you gave me an heir. In my world, that means everything. The transfer to the private suite happened exactly as Dante had said it would. Efficiently, quickly, with no regard for hospital protocol. Orderlies jumped to attention, nurses hurried to accommodate, and within an hour I found myself in a room that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital ward. The night nurse arrived as evening fell, a sturdy woman named Rosa with kind eyes and gentle hands who spoke Italian with Dante and English with me. She took Sandro for his next feeding, insisting I needed rest, and I was too exhausted to argue. Dante stayed. He removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and settled into the armchair beside my bed like he planned to remain there indefinitely. Outside the door, I could hear his guards speaking in low voices, a constant reminder of the reality I'd stepped into. You should go home, I said, though part of me dreaded being alone. Get some sleep. This is where I need to be. His eyes met mine in the dimness. With you, with our son. People will talk. Your associates. Your whatever you call them. Let them talk. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. They will learn quickly that you and Alessandro are untouchable, that anyone who even looks at you wrong will answer to me personally. The possessiveness should have frightened me. Instead, it kindled something warm and dangerous in my chest. The seductive promise of being protected, cherished, claimed by a man powerful enough to make the world bend to his will. I'm scared, I whispered into the darkness. Good. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. Fear will keep you cautious, but I promise you, Elena, I will never let anything harm you or our son. This is my vow. I fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, steady and sure, and dreamed of golden cages lined with silk. 3 weeks in Dante's world, and I still felt like an imposter wearing someone else's life. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, marble floors that echoed with every step. Rooms so vast they seemed to swallow sound. My old studio apartment could have fit in the master bathroom alone, where a soaking tub the size of a small pool sat beneath a chandelier that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life. Sandro's nursery was a palace in miniature. Hand-painted murals of Italian countryside scenes covered the walls. A crib crafted from cherry wood sat beneath a mobile of delicate glass stars that chimed softly when the air conditioning kicked on. Shelves overflowed with stuffed animals, books in English and Italian, toys he wouldn't be old enough to use for years. Everything was perfect. Everything was terrifying. I stood at the nursery window now, Sandro sleeping against my shoulder, and watched the city stretch out below us like a kingdom. From this height, the streets looked clean, orderly, manageable. You couldn't see the garbage or the desperation or the people struggling to survive. You couldn't see who I'd been just a month ago. You should be resting. Dante's voice came from the doorway, and I turned to find him leaning against the frame, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. Even exhausted, he looked dangerous, a panther in repose, all coiled energy and lethal grace. I can't sleep when he sleeps, I admitted. I keep checking to make sure he's breathing. Rosa is monitoring him. He crossed the room, his presence filling the space. That's why we pay her. I know, but I'm his mother. I should be the one. You should be the one taking care of yourself. His hands settled on my shoulders, thumbs pressing into the knots of tension. You barely eat. You look like a ghost, Kara. This isn't sustainable. I wanted to argue, but his touch felt too good, easing muscles I hadn't realized were screaming. I let him guide me to the rocking chair, watched as he took Sandro with practiced ease and placed him in the crib. Our son barely stirred, his tiny chest rising and falling with peaceful regularity. Come, Dante said, offering his hand. You need food. The kitchen was all stainless steel and black granite, equipped with appliances I didn't know how to use, but Dante moved through it with surprising competence, pulling containers from the refrigerator. Homemade pasta, fresh bread, containers of sauce that smelled like heaven. You cook? I asked, perching on one of the bar stools. My nonna insisted all her grandchildren learn. He smiled, a real one that softened the harsh lines of his face. She said a man who cannot feed himself is no man at all. I watched him heat the food, plate it with care, pour wine for himself and water for me since I was still nursing. The domesticity of it felt surreal. This man who commanded empires, who made people disappear with a word, serving me pasta at midnight in a kitchen that cost more than most houses. Eat, he commanded, sliding the plate across the counter. I did, and nearly moaned at the first bite. This is incredible. My aunt made it. She's been cooking enough to feed an army and sending it over daily. He leaned against the counter, watching me eat with satisfaction. The whole family is anxious to meet you and Alessandro. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. The whole family? There's a gathering this Sunday. Nothing formal. Just cousins, aunts, uncles. They want to welcome you properly. The bite I'd just taken turned to ash in my mouth. Dante, I can't. I don't know how to act around people like that. What to say, what to wear. You act like yourself. He moved around the counter, tilting my chin up to meet his gaze. You say what you think. You wear whatever makes you comfortable. They will love you because I love you, and because you gave the family its newest heir. I love you. The words hung between us, casual and devastating. You don't love me, I whispered. You barely know me. I know you bite your lip when you're nervous. I know you hum to Sandro when you think no one is listening. I know you fold his clothes 3 times to get them perfect, and you check his breathing 17 times a night. Yes, Kara, I've been counting. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. I know you're terrified of this life, but too stubborn to run from it. I know you have a strength that most of my soldiers would envy, and I know that I want you in my bed, in my life. wearing my ring and bearing my name. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is crazy. People don't just... We had one night together. One night. And now you're talking about marriage and family and... One night that gave me everything I didn't know I needed. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. Tell me you don't feel it, Elena. Tell me you don't lie awake at night remembering how I touched you. How you trembled against me. How you said my name like salvation. I couldn't. God help me, I couldn't lie about that. Feeling attraction isn't the same as love, I managed. Then we will start with attraction and build from there. His lips brushed mine, soft as silk, dangerous as a blade. Let me court you properly, cara mia. Let me show you what life could be as mine. The kiss deepened before I could respond, and I melted into it despite every logical protest screaming in my head. He tasted like wine and possession, and when his tongue swept into my mouth, I heard myself whimper. He pulled back, breathing hard, eyes blazing. Sunday, he said roughly. You will meet my family, and you will see that you already belong to us. Sunday arrived too quickly. Rosa helped me dress, choosing a cream-colored dress from the wardrobe Dante had filled without asking my opinion. It was beautiful. Soft cashmere that skimmed my body. Elegant without being ostentatious. She swept my hair into a loose bun, applied minimal makeup, and declared me perfect. I felt like a fraud. The gathering was at his aunt's house in Brooklyn, a sprawling estate hidden behind high walls and electronic gates. Cars filled the circular driveway, expensive models I recognized from movies. Men in dark suits patrolled the grounds, speaking into earpieces, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Dante helped me from the car, Sandro in his carrier, and I felt every guard's gaze assess and catalog me, the woman who'd captured the boss's attention. The mother of the heir, the outsider being granted entry to the kingdom. Relax, Dante murmured against my ear. They can smell fear. That's not helping. His laugh was low and genuine. You survived childbirth and 3 weeks with me. You can survive Sunday dinner. The front door burst open before we reached it, and a tiny woman with steel gray hair and eyes like Dante's launched herself at us. Dante, finally, she grabbed his face, pulling him down for kisses on both cheeks, then turned to me with an assessing look that made me want to squirm. And this is Elena, the girl who stole my nephew's heart and gave us a baby before even a proper wedding. Zia Carlotta, Dante said warningly. Oh, hush. I'm old enough to say what I think. She peered at Sandro, and her entire face transformed with tenderness. Bellissimo. He has the Moretti chin, and your eyes, Dante. May I? I handed over my son with trembling hands, watching this stranger cradle him with practiced ease. She cooed in Italian, and Sandro's eyes opened, focusing on her face with solemn curiosity. Come inside. Everyone is dying to meet you both. She swept toward the house, still holding Sandro, and I had no choice but to follow. The house was full of people, at least 30, maybe more, men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, children running between rooms with the confidence of those raised in luxury. Conversations died as we entered, every eye turning to assess the newcomer. Dante's hand settled possessively on my lower back. Everyone, this is Elena Torres, mother of my son Alessandro. She is under my protection, which means she is family. Treat her accordingly. The message was clear. Accept her or answer to me. The crowd surged forward, aunts wanting to hold the baby, cousins offering congratulations, uncles assessing me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I smiled until my face hurt, accepted kisses on both cheeks, tried to remember names I'd forget in 5 minutes. Through it all, Dante stayed close, a solid presence at my back. You're doing beautifully, he murmured during a brief lull. See? They love you already. They love Sandro, I corrected. I'm just the incubator who happens to be included. Wrong. His arm slid around my waist, pulling me against him. My cousin Marco hasn't stopped staring at you. I may have to have a conversation with him about appropriate boundaries. I glanced over and found a younger man, mid-20s, handsome in a boyish way, quickly looking away when our eyes met. He's just curious, I said. He's thinking things that will get him hurt. The possessiveness in Dante's voice sent heat curling through my stomach. You are mine, Elena. The sooner everyone understands that, the better. Dinner was a lavish affair, multiple courses, wine flowing freely, laughter and rapid-fire Italian that I couldn't follow. I sat beside Dante at the head of the table, acutely aware of the honor and burden of that position. This was where his wife would sit, where the Donna of the family belonged. Zia Carlotta stood, glass raised. A toast. To Alessandro Dante Moretti, newest blessing to our family, and to Elena, who has given our Dante something we thought he'd never find, a reason to build instead of just protect. Glasses clinked. Eyes turned to me expectantly. Dante stood, helping me to my feet with a hand under my elbow. To family, he said simply, and to the future. The party continued late into the evening. I fed Sandro in a quiet room upstairs, surrounded by cousins eager to offer advice and horror stories about their own children. They were warm, welcoming, and I found myself relaxing despite my fears. He's good for you, our Dante, one of the older women said, patting my hand. I've never seen him like this, peaceful, happy. You've given him something money cannot buy. On the drive home, Sandro slept in his car seat, and I stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. That wasn't so terrible, was it? Dante asked. It was nice. Your family is kind. They are protective, like me. His hand found mine across the seat. They will guard you and Alessandro as fiercely as I do. You are one of us now, Cara, for better or worse. For better or worse. The words sounded like wedding vows. Back at the penthouse, I put Sandro down while Dante disappeared into his office for what he called unavoidable business. I changed into pajamas, silk ones that had appeared in my dresser, and was heading to bed when I heard his voice rise, sharp with anger. I shouldn't have stopped, shouldn't have listened. But I did. I don't care what Castellano wants, Dante snarled in English, clearly for my benefit if I was nearby. The answer is no. My family is off limits because I said so, and that's the only reason you need. If he has concerns, he can bring them to me in person. We'll settle this the old way. A pause, then quieter, more dangerous. Tell him if he goes near Elena or my son, I will burn his empire to ashes and salt the earth where it stood. Are we clear? The call ended. Silence fell. I backed away from the door, heart pounding, and nearly screamed when I turned to find Dante standing in the hallway behind me. How much did you hear? He asked softly. Enough. My voice shook. Who's Castellano? What does he want? Dante's expression was carved from granite. A rival. Someone who sees you and Alessandro as leverage against me. Leverage. The word tasted like poison. You mean hostages. A threat I will eliminate before it becomes reality. He stepped closer, and I saw murder in his eyes, cold, calculated, certain. This is my world, Elena. This is what I protected you from by keeping you close. There are men who would hurt you to wound me, and I will kill every single one of them before I let that happen. I should have been horrified. Should have grabbed Sandro and run. Instead, I stepped into his arms, let him hold me against the storm of violence he carried inside him, and whispered against his chest, Then keep us safe, whatever it takes. His arms tightened around me like bands of steel. Always, he vowed, on my life, on my blood, on everything I am. Always. The threat came 3 days later. I was in the nursery with Sandro, singing a lullaby my mother used to hum when I was small, when Dante burst through the door with an expression that turned my blood to ice. Pack a bag, he said, his voice clipped and controlled in that way that meant he was barely holding himself together. Enough for 3 days. We're leaving in 10 minutes. What? Dante, what's happening? Castellano made his move. He was already pulling clothes from my dresser, shoving them into a leather overnight bag with none of his usual precision. He sent flowers to the penthouse lobby, black roses with a note that said he looks forward to meeting Alessandro soon. My hands went numb. I clutched Sandro tighter, and he squirmed against my chest, sensing my fear. He threatened our son, I whispered. He signed his death warrant. Dante's eyes met mine, and I saw the predator fully unleashed. No civility, no restraint, just pure lethal intent. But first, I get you both somewhere he can't reach. Somewhere even I barely trust anyone to know about. The safe house was 2 hours north, hidden in the woods of upstate New York. It looked like a modest cabin from the outside, but inside it was a fortress, reinforced walls, security systems that would make a bank jealous, enough supplies to withstand a siege. Rosa came with us, along with 4 of Dante's most trusted guards. They took positions around the perimeter, while Dante carried our bags inside, his movements efficient and deadly calm. "How long do we have to stay here?" I asked, watching him check window locks with practiced ease. "Until I've handled the situation." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "A few days at most." "You mean until you've killed him?" His hand stilled on the window latch. "Yes." I should have begged him not to, should have pleaded for a peaceful solution, for mercy, for anything other than more violence, but I looked at Sandro sleeping in his carrier, so small and helpless and perfect, and felt something fierce and primal rise in my chest. "Make sure he can never threaten us again," I said quietly. Dante turned, and something like pride flickered across his face. "You understand now what it means to protect what's yours." "I understand that I'll do anything to keep him safe." I moved closer, until we stood inches apart, even if that means accepting who you are, what you do. "And who am I, Elena?" His hand came up, fingers threading through my hair. "Tell me what you see when you look at me." "A killer," I whispered. "A criminal. A man who built an empire on fear and violence." I pressed my palm against his chest, felt his heart beating strong and steady beneath the expensive fabric. "And the father of my child. The man who makes me feel safe even when the world is burning down around us. The man I'm terrified of loving because once I admit it, there's no going back." His kiss was devastating, all possession and promise and desperate need. He backed me against the wall, his body pinning mine, and I yielded to it, to him, to the terrible truth that I wanted this despite everything it meant. "Say it," he demanded against my lips. "Say you're mine. I'm yours." The words came easily, inevitably. "God help me. I'm yours." He left that night, once Sandro was asleep and Rosa had settled into the guest room. I watched from the window as his car disappeared down the dark driveway, red taillights swallowed by the forest, and felt my heart go with him. The guards changed shifts every 6 hours. Rosa kept me distracted with stories about Dante as a child, mischievous, protective of his younger cousins, already showing signs of the leader he'd become. I nursed Sandro, changed diapers, sang lullabies, and tried not to imagine what Dante was doing in the city. Tried not to imagine him coming home in a body bag. The second night, my phone rang. Dante's name flashed on the screen. "Are you safe?" I answered without preamble. "Always worried about me, Kara?" His voice was rough, exhausted. "I'm fine. It's handled." Handled. I closed my eyes. "Is he dead?" "He's no longer a threat to you or Alessandro. That's all you need to know." Part of me wanted details, wanted to know exactly what he'd done. The rest of me was grateful for the distance, the plausible deniability that let me sleep at night. "When can we come home?" I asked instead. "Tomorrow. I'm cleaning up the loose ends tonight. By morning, it will be safe for you to return." A pause. Then softer. "I missed you. Both of you. This penthouse feels empty without Sandro's crying at 3 a.m. and you singing off-key in the nursery." "I don't sing off-key," I protested, smiling despite everything. "Kara, you absolutely do. But I love it anyway." Another pause. "I love you, Elena. I need you to know that. Not because of Alessandro, not because of obligation. I love you because you see the monster in me and don't flinch, because you're strong enough to stand beside me in this life, because you made me believe I could have something good, something pure. Even with blood on my hands, tears burned my eyes. I love you too. I think I have since that first night, even though I told myself it was just attraction, just chemistry. But it's more. It's everything. Then marry me." The words were quiet but certain. "Not because of Alessandro, not because of tradition or family expectations. Marry me because you want to build a life with me. Because you choose this, choose us, Choose me despite everything you know I am. Yes. I didn't hesitate. Yes, Dante. I'll marry you. I heard him exhale, like he'd been holding his breath. I'll be there in the morning to bring you home, to start our future. He kept his promise. Dawn was breaking over the trees when his car pulled up, and I met him at the door with Sandro in my arms. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension in every line of his body, but alive. Whole. Mine. It's over? I asked. It's over. He gathered us both into his arms, his face buried in my hair. The threat is eliminated. The family is secure. You're safe. The drive back to the city felt different somehow, like we were returning to a new life rather than the old one. Dante held my hand the entire way, his thumb tracing circles on my palm, while Sandro slept peacefully in his car seat. The penthouse gleamed in the morning light, and I realized with a start that it felt like home. Not because of the luxury or the security, but because this was where we belonged, the three of us, building something together. I want to do this right, Dante said once we were inside, once Rosa had taken Sandro for his morning routine. Proper courtship, proper proposal. I know we're doing everything backward, but... We already did the courtship, I interrupted, moving into his arms. One perfect night that gave us everything, and you already proposed. I already said yes. What more do we need? This. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and my breath caught. The ring inside was stunning, a deep red ruby surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum. It was my grandmother's. She wore it for 60 years, through wars and migrations and everything the world threw at them. She gave it to me before she died and made me promise to only give it to a woman worthy of the Moretti name. He slid it onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for me all along. Elena Torres, soon to be Elena Moretti, you are the strongest, bravest, most infuriating woman I've ever known. You gave me a son. You gave me a reason to be more than just a boss, a criminal, a name people fear. You gave me a family. Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, providing for you, and loving you with everything I am? Yes, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Yes to all of it. The wedding happened 4 weeks later, a small private ceremony in the garden of Zia Carlotta's estate. Just family, just the people who mattered. I wore ivory lace and carried white roses, and Sandro slept through the entire ceremony in Rosa's arms, blissfully unaware that his parents were making it official. Dante's vows were in Italian, beautiful and raw. And even though I only understood half the words, I felt their meaning in my bones. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I choose you. Every day, despite everything, because of everything. I choose us. The kiss sealed more than a marriage. It sealed a promise, a future, a life built on the ashes of who we'd been, and the hope of who we could become together. Months passed. Sandro grew strong and healthy, his personality emerging, stubborn like his father, determined like his mother, with a smile that could melt the hardest heart. The penthouse filled with his laughter, his toys, the chaos of family life. I learned to navigate Dante's world, the politics, the danger, the careful balance of power and respect. I learned which questions not to ask, which doors stayed closed, which parts of his life I'd never fully understand. But I also learned that beneath the violence and the empire, he was just a man trying to protect the people he loved. We had Sunday dinners with the family, holidays filled with loud voices and too much food, christenings and birthdays, and all the messy, beautiful normalcy that comes with belonging somewhere. And at night, when the city lights glittered below us and Sandro slept peacefully in his nursery, Dante would pull me close and whisper promises against my skin, of protection, of devotion, of a love that defied logic and bloomed in darkness. I never went back to the restaurant, never went back to that tiny studio, or the life of invisibility and struggle that Elena Torres died the night she spilled water on a dangerous man's suit and caught his attention. In her place rose Elena Moretti, wife, mother, donna of a criminal empire. It wasn't the life I'd imagined. It wasn't safe or simple or easy, but it was mine. We were mine. and I'd walk through fire to keep it. On Sandro's first birthday, the entire family gathered again. The house overflowed with people, presents, laughter. I stood in the kitchen with Zia Carlotta, watching through the window as Dante held our son, showing him how to blow out the single candle on his cake. "You've made him happy," she said, squeezing my hand. I wasn't sure anyone could, but look at him. He's softer now. Still dangerous, still deadly when he needs to be, but there's light in him again. You and that baby brought him back from the darkness. He saved me too, I admitted. From a life of just surviving. He gave me a reason to live. That's what love does, child. It saves us from ourselves. That night, after the guests had left and Sandro was asleep, Dante found me on the balcony, staring out at the city we ruled together. "What are you thinking?" he asked, arms sliding around my waist from behind. That a year ago, I was alone and terrified, about to give birth with no one to call. And now I have everything, a husband who would burn the world for me, a son who's perfect, a family that accepted me despite everything. I leaned back against his chest. How did I get so lucky? Luck had nothing to do with it, cara mia. This was fate. Destiny. You were always meant to be mine, from the moment you spilled that water and looked at me with those beautiful, terrified eyes. He turned me in his arms, his gaze intense. "And I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing this life. Choosing me. I could never regret it." I pulled him down for a kiss, slow and deep and full of promise. "You're my home, Dante. You and Sandro. Wherever you are, that's where I belong." The city glittered below us, full of danger and beauty and possibility. Somewhere out there, threats still existed. Rivals plotted. Danger lurked in shadows. But here, in this moment, wrapped in my husband's arms with our son sleeping safely inside, I felt invincible, protected, loved. I'd walked into a hospital alone and terrified, with nothing but a dangerous man's name on an emergency contact form. I'd walked out with everything, a family, a future, a love fierce enough to survive anything. And I'd do it all again, every painful, beautiful, terrifying moment, because it led me here,